All right, let's check in with the listeners.
Hey, listeners.
Hi, listeners. What's up, listeners?
Remember, you can always reach us at the email address,
What's up,
gamescoop@ign.com. I was really excited. I thought we got an email from a girl, but because it said the subject line said Melanie, but then the email is signed Josh.
Only the fishermen write in the trout spout.
So,
the fisherwomen.
So Melanie, if you are watching, your email has been compromised by Josh. And Josh asks, what game do you remember being the game that started you in gaming? For me, it was a PC game called Harpoon. Wasn't the first game I played, but was the first game I really played. Spent hours and hours on the military tactical game. Yeah. So we want to know what's the game that really got us in there. And
interesting.
Justin, I'm gonna let you go first, but I also want to point out, we talked beforehand that this is he's stealing my game.
We share.
We share a game that really got us.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an especially surprising. It's Super Mario Brothers. Yeah. We got an NES for it was an Easter gift for the family. Oddly enough.
How old were you?
5.
Easter gift.
Yeah.
From
5.
Just from your parents?
It was for the family.
The rabbit shows up with a big basket of games.
Yeah, I mean, it was Mario. I was a little bit too young to ever play Atari, and so I didn't know. I mean, now in hindsight, I realize how special Mario was, and his physics and the smoothness of his jumping and the smoothness of the scrolling stages was really special and different than games like Pitfall that had come before. But at the time, I just, was really fun, and I liked that there were so many secrets in it, and, you'd hit an invisible block, and then you would find, I remember I found the warp zone, on my own by jumping above the stage in 1-2. And that's, mind-blowing when you're, 5 or 6 years old. That's a really big deal.
You've discovered a secret.
Yeah.
No one
else is only yours.
Yeah.
It always looked like something was wrong when you were running up there.
Yeah.
Running past the score.
That's, how clever is that?
Yeah.
You're up there where this element of the game that you just don't think that you should be able to interact with.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Yeah, that's not supposed to be the world that you're in. That's just something for
And it
your
also felt
information.
like you could go underwater, and, that felt really special. And, it just felt like a really big, special game. It was a big, special game.
Yeah, we had an Atari 2600, and I would play games like Defender and Atlantis with my dad, Combat. But there was a Showbiz Pizza near my grandparents' house, and Showbiz is like Chuck E. Cheese.
Right.
And he would take us there and give us tokens, and my sister and I would play games. And then one day, Super Mario Brothers, the arcade cabinet was there, and then that was I could tell it was different and special. It was just there was a long line of people waiting to play the game.
Wow.
I just played that at Brewcade here in San Francisco. They have the Mario arcade.
Brewcade is really cool. If anyone's in the Bay Area,
you
should check out some Market Street.
Also, Foundry, Folsom Street Foundry, another great gaming and.
Folsom Street Foundry. I haven't been there.
Yeah. Tuesdays and Thursdays they do game nights, and it's incredible. A huge, beautiful space, lots of fighting games, lots of Smash, lots of Mario Kart, and board games.
I'm going to Portland this weekend.
Ground Control.
I'm going to Ground Control.
Yep.
I'm very excited about that.
It's awesome.
I heard they have a full bar.
Yeah. I just want to say, so I found Super Mario Brothers at the arcade, and then when I saw a commercial on TV for this new system that lets me play Super Mario Brothers at home, that was it. That was I told my parents I have to have this.
We had that a couple times in our lives growing up. Was this amazing moment of being able to go to an arcade and play something that was insurmountable to you? Because now I bought an arcade cabinet a couple years ago. I gave it to Sam Claiborne, who works here at IGN, because I didn't have room for it anymore. And when I was growing up, I thought arcades were full of technology from top to bottom. And I was like, there's no way you could ever put that on a... And then when I got an arcade, I realized you open it up, the entire game fits on a thing this big, and there's a big fat TV up top, and the rest is just bugs and dust.
Maybe a rat in there.
It's a dead rat, and that's about it. And I remember there was a couple times like that growing up where you would play an arcade game, and then it would come to and this happened with Super Mario Brothers, it happened with Donkey Kong, it happened with Ninja Turtles, the arcade, which was 4-player, and it blew my mind because I was like, oh, there's so much circuitry in there, and it's no, they put it on the NES, and on the NES they added more foot soldiers. They're like, well, just throw in more foot. That was actually a box quote. They're like, more foot soldiers. And then Mortal Kombat was one of those games that we played in the arcade. And then they put out on Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, and we stopped going to the arcades. We're like, we don't need to go there anymore. Yeah. And then the arcades went away forever.
Yeah,
we ruined our lives.
Except now we have Brewcade and Ground Control.
It felt magic and special when arcade games came home. It felt like you were cheating.
Well, and to see how they got better over the years too.
Super Mario Bros. Was the first one that was identical to its arcade version in its home version.
Yeah. And then when you have you take Mortal Kombat. So Mortal Kombat 1 when that came home was it was fine. but it was like a joke compared to the arcade version.
But
and then 2 was getting was like, whoa, I actually feel like it's okay if I stay home and just play this because it's close enough. It's not perfect. I still enjoyed going to the arcade to play it there, but it was MK3 and then playing MK Trilogy on the PS1. Yeah. That was like, that's it.
I had it on the N64.
Flawless. Me too. So the N64 version was
$80.
Good. Yeah,
$80.
I mean, yeah, 75.
That PS1 version was just like, that was it. I don't need to go the arcade anymore.
So Brian, what was the game?
So the first game I ever played was there was a laundromat in Jersey City on the corner that had a Donkey Kong arcade cabinet in it, and I was like 4 years old, and my dad lifted me up to play it, and I really liked it. But then there was probably a year or two between that and when we got the NES, where I did most of the time I actually played video games was at school, because school had like weird computers where you played like stuff like Math Blaster and Reader Rabbit and Oregon Trail and Donkey Kong. Like there was this really, and this was like, to date myself here, this was when computers had 4 colors, and it was like black, white, purple, and baby blue. And every game you played was in those 4 colors. And then eventually, like, better computers came out. But the first Oregon Trail I ever played was just black and green, right? It was the original version of that game.
Bison Murder.
Yeah, so it was actually
Bison Murder Simulator.
It was a couple of those games fell right in between me getting an NES, which, you know, when I got an NES and Mario was sold out when I went to get my NES that day. So I got Zelda.
It wasn't a bundle.
No. Actually, so I got the weirdest bundle of the NES ever. I don't know if anyone remembers this. There was a version. There was a bundle of the NES that didn't come with a game, or a Rob the Robot, or a Power Pad, or a light gun. It came with a book.
What book?
It came with a book that was about this thick. That was a huge guide of every NES game ever made and all the ones that were soon to come. And there was like a 1-page like cheat codes and explanation and maps. It was like before Nintendo Power was Nintendo Power.
It's a book about all this stuff you can't play.
Yeah, it was all this, and as a kid, it was just like this tome of like, I'll never have all of these games. And like there was a full page about Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and you would turn the page and it'd be a full page on Contra. Like third-party stuff was in there. It was all beautiful 8-bit graphics all over the place. So I got the book bundle of the NES.
Weird.
I hadn't really thought about that in a while. So it was weird. I think there was a couple years there where I was mostly playing like weird edutainment games on a SVGA monitor, and that was
Math Blaster.
Yeah, and I was like excited to go to school because I'm like, I can play video games at school. And then we got an NES and a computer at home, and you know the rest is history.
So you think those edutainment games are like what got you into gaming?
I think they taught me what video games could be. I think they also taught me what I never wanted to play again. Because I think like by the 50th time you play Reader Rabbit or Math Blaster, you're sort of like, I get it, but like I want something with a story, you know? Like Super Mario Brothers, the greatest story in video game history.
Vince, how about you?
So for me, it goes back before Super Mario Brothers. The first game that I was really super into was Q*bert. I played Q*bert not so much in the arcades, but at home on the Texas Instruments, the TI-99 4A. That was my first gaming system that I owned. My sister had a 2600, but you know my sister was older than me. I wasn't allowed generally into her room. I mean, sometimes I snuck in there and played a little bit of Pitfall or you know, a really bad version of Pac-Man. But no, generally speaking, the first thing that was mine was that TI-99, and for a long time, Q*bert was the only game I had on it. And I think what grabbed my little tiny like 5-year-old mind about it was that, you know, Pac-Man seemed so linear to me. I mean, they're both single-screen experiences, right? But Q*bert had this at least illusion of depth, of like 3D depth.
Right.
You know, it was like I was maneuvering top to bottom, but I was also maneuvering left to right, and it looked like I was coming in and out of the screen. You know, so to me, it seemed like a much more free, sophisticated, and dynamic thing. Like
you could also jump out of the game.
Yeah.
Like you could jump off of the game board, which like you can't in Pac-Man. You're just in this death maze forever. Like you're trapped. Even when you try to leave, you show up on the other side. It's like this Greek tragedy.
Yeah, and that's actually
Q*bert can just opt out.
Yeah, he's just like, nah, I'm committing suicide.
And the interesting thing about that too is that that's actually a mechanic in the game too, because whereas Pac-Man has the limited resource there is the power pellets, right? You grab a power pellet, now you're God mode for like the next however long. So the similar thing in Q*bert were the discs, the escape discs, and the whole thing is like Coily, the snake. He was like the most imposing enemy because he could kind of go up and down. He had the same mobility as you basically, and he was the only one who had that. So, but you could trick him. You could stand on the edge near where one of those discs were, and then you could jump off, and he would try to jump after you to capture you, and he would miss, and you'd go back to the top on this escape disc. And like that was such a cool, like you had to think about the difference between that and Pac-Man. Pac-Man was just like I get the power up and then I win. And this it was like I've got to lure him in, I've got to bait him, I've got to time it just right, and then like I got to try to make my escape and trick him into dying. It was like a way more. I didn't realize at the time why I liked that more. It was just like, oh, cool, pretty colors. I'm 5.
I really appreciate that scene in Wreck-It Ralph where Q*bert's like this down and out homeless dude. Because like if you think about Pac-Man and Q*bert, like they were just as they were both really fun games.
Q*bert got left behind.
Q*bert got left behind. Like he is in the history of video games. Like we got a Q*bert.
They bring him back.
Q*bert's
they brought out a new Q*bert game this year. Yeah.
More different enemies with more different AI, routines to chase you down.
Q*bert's like the 2 chicks in Destiny's Child.
Yeah. Like who?
The other one.
Yeah. Pac-Man's Beyonce.
Yeah, in that scenario, Pac-Man's Beyonce.
Yeah.
But I want to ask. I want to ask another question.
Pac-Man could be Beyonce.
That's true.
I want to ask another question that kind of piggybacks off this.
Yeah.
Because there's the game that like was the first one that got us in, right? But then like, what's the one that wrangled you in for life? Like we're all adults, at least in terms of the amount of years we have been on Earth.
Yeah.
And we're still doing this, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm going to be doing this until like my hands don't work anymore. So like.
You'll be able to control games with your mind.
Yeah.
Right. So there's
no
got to
one's
be.
going to want to see those reviews, by the way. I think it's good, but I can't play it.
What was I saying again? No, but so
you checked out Senior Citizen with Arthritis on YouTube.com.
But like, what's the moment I feel like where you knew as like a young adult or not a child when you're like, I'm going to be doing this for
Zelda,
a long time.
100% Legend
Which Zelda?
The original Legend of Zelda. Like the first time I started sequence breaking in that game, when like I accidentally went to the 3rd temple before the first one, and I'm like, you can do that? Or typing in your name as Zelda and playing an entire second quest. Like the fact that game had a sequel in it was crazy to me. And I probably spent 200 hours playing that game. Like to the point now, somebody was playing it on the GBA in the office a few years ago, and I walked up to them and I was like, burn that bush, bomb that wall, burn that, move that block, move that here. You have now, you have 7 heart containers before the first level. Done. And they were just like, oh my God, like, how do you know all that? And I'm like, this is ingrained in my head. Like that my mom will tell the story about how there was like a full year where all she heard was a Legend of Zelda theme song coming out of our living room. And she didn't hear anything but that. I didn't watch TVs or movies. I just played Zelda.
And young you knew then that this was something you're never going to get rid of.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it was just so special. It was like, it was really hard to explain to parents at the time. Like my parents are both very well read. Like they're teachers, and they're sitting there with a whole library of books in the house. Why don't you read? Oh yeah, I will. Why don't you do this? Go outside. I'm like, yeah, but there's an adventure right here. Yeah. You don't understand. There's a story here. Like this guy has to save this girl from this pig.
Yeah,
and
an old man in a cave.
An old man does a very irresponsible thing by giving a dangerous weapon to a child. And it's
just a wooden sword.
It's just a wooden sword. But to me, there's an entire adventure. Like when I think about Legend of Zelda, I don't think about like the 8-bit graphics. I think about the paintings that were on the back of the box and in the manuals and stuff like that.
I love the art in the original Zelda manual.
Where it's just this kid, and there in front of him is this insurmountable mountain and these giant lizard men, and he's got to fight them all. And I think about the game like that, like it's a conquest of this huge adventure, and not really just a bunch of blocks smashing into each other.
Yeah, it's interesting that Zelda was like open world, right?
Yeah.
Go up, down, left, or right.
Sure.
Well, not down at the start, but I mean, like you can go, and it's like, all right, go. Hope you went in that cave, otherwise you're host. Like,
Yeah,
but you'll figure it out.
Yep.
Yeah, it respected our intelligence a lot more than a lot of modern games do.
And like you'll go right and run into Octoroks, or go left, run into other stuff.
Or you
like,
blow
it's
up
cool.
a wall and you walk in and some guy's like, you found a secret, and he gives you money. You blow up another wall and some guy goes, you broke my door, pay me. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's one of the first 20 video games ever made or whatever. And it's like
And then
how the hell did they do that?
And then he went on to destroy everyone's pots and everything, and no one cares.
Yeah. Like I mean, Link's gone on to do 1,000 other adventures. The original Legend of Zelda is still one of my favorite. I still play through that game once a year. Like
That's awesome.
It's still Super Mario Brothers for me, because that's the one where I convinced my parents to get me my video game console, and I was like the first kid in my neighborhood, the first kid at school to have an NES, so everyone wanted to talk to me about it and come over to my house and play. And that's what actually like started gaming became a big part of my identity, and like who I was. So it was still Super Mario Brothers.
I remember that was really cool how that happened a lot in the 80s and 90s, was you made friends through video games.
Yeah, like
and you would go to their houses and you would play games that you didn't have, and it was like going to a different world. Like you'd go to some kid's house and you'd sit in on this floor, and his mom would bring in food, and you'd eat snacks and play Silver Surfer for NES, which is like a game I would never buy, but my friend got it. Did you guys like trade games with each other? Like let each other borrow them, and then some idiot would write his name on yours, and then you'd have to fight him.
Yeah, that would be.
I didn't loan my games
really
out.
bad.
Really?
No.
Really?
No.
You were that kid?
Yeah.
Oh man, you're bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't loan them out.
Really?
Yeah.
It was like
I mean, not as like a kid. Like in high school, I would, but not as a.
It was like a
youth.
It was like mixtapes on like a black market with my friends and I. Like we were constantly trading. Everyone, you would like the big thing you couldn't do was I couldn't lend a game to Vince, and then Vince would lend that game to Damon, and then I'd be like, "Where's the game?" And you'd be like, "Damon has it," and then Damon would be like, "Oh, my mom sold it," and I'd be like, "I don't have." There's no cops that can help me here. Like this won't hold up in court.